Switzerland has no oil, no gold mines, no major natural resources. It's landlocked with no access to the ocean. 60% of the country is mountains that are impossible to farm or develop. The population is only 8.5 million people, smaller than New York City. The country is divided into 4 different language groups that don't even speak the same language. By every measure, Switzerland should be poor, divided, and irrelevant. Yet Switzerland is the richest country in Europe. The GDP per capita is over $90,000, higher than the United States, higher than Germany, higher than almost anywhere on Earth. Swiss citizens enjoy the highest quality of life in the world, the lowest crime rates, the best healthcare, the cleanest cities, political stability that's lasted over 200 years without a single war or revolution. And Switzerland did this by being neutral, by staying out of every major conflict for 2 centuries, while everyone around them destroyed each other. But neutrality alone doesn't make you rich. What made Switzerland wealthy was something far more controversial: banking secrecy. For decades, Switzerland allowed anyone in the world to hide their money in Swiss banks with complete anonymity. Dictators, drug lords, corrupt politicians, tax evaders, everyone. No questions asked. Switzerland became the world's vault, and they charged a premium for the service. But there's a dark side to this story. During World War II, Switzerland accepted Nazi gold, including gold stolen from Holocaust victims. They profited from both sides of the war while claiming neutrality. And even today, Switzerland harbors billions in hidden wealth from questionable sources. So how did Switzerland become the richest country in Europe? How did they turn neutrality and secrecy into a $700 billion banking industry? And what are the moral costs of this model? In this video, I'm breaking down exactly how Switzerland built an empire on discretion, precision, and staying out of everyone else's wars. Let's get into it. Switzerland's story starts with geography, and that geography shaped everything that came after. Switzerland sits in the heart of the Alps, surrounded by France, Germany, Italy, and Austria. The mountains make up 60% of the country. They're not just scenic, they're a natural fortress. For centuries, these mountains made Switzerland almost impossible to invade. Armies would have to march through narrow mountain passes where a small defending force could hold off a much larger army. This made Switzerland strategically valuable, but also difficult to conquer. Because of this, Switzerland developed differently from other European countries. Instead of being ruled by a king or emperor, Switzerland became a confederation of small, independent regions called cantons. Each canton governed itself, had its own laws, and jealously guarded its independence. This system started in 1291 when 3 cantons formed a defensive alliance. Over the next few centuries, more cantons joined, and by the 1500s, Switzerland was a loose confederation of 13 cantons that worked together for defense, but remained independent in everything else. But here's what's interesting. Switzerland was poor. The mountains made farming difficult. There were no major resources to mine, no trade routes that brought wealth. So how did Swiss people survive? They became mercenaries. Swiss soldiers were considered the best fighters in Europe. They were disciplined, loyal, and fearless. Kings and emperors across Europe hired Swiss mercenaries to fight their wars. This brought money into Switzerland, but it also taught the Swiss a valuable lesson. War is profitable if you're selling the service but not fighting for yourself. By the 1600s and 1700s, Switzerland had developed a culture of pragmatism and neutrality. They realized that taking sides in European conflicts was dangerous and unprofitable. It was better to stay neutral, trade with everyone, and profit from the chaos without getting destroyed. But this informal neutrality became official in 1815, and that's when Switzerland's rise truly began. In 1815, after the Napoleonic Wars ended, European powers gathered at the Congress of Vienna to redraw the map of Europe and establish a new order. And they made a decision that would change Switzerland forever. They declared Switzerland permanently neutral. This wasn't Switzerland's idea. The major powers, France, Austria, Prussia, and Britain, decided that Switzerland should be a neutral buffer zone between them. They didn't want any single power controlling the strategic Alpine passes, so they guaranteed Switzerland's independence and neutrality in exchange for Switzerland promising to never take sides in any European conflict. Switzerland agreed, and this became the foundation of everything that followed. Permanent neutrality meant Switzerland would stay out of all wars. They wouldn't join military alliances, they wouldn't take sides, they would trade with everyone and fight with no one. And this turned out to be incredibly profitable. While the rest of Europe spent the 1800s and 1900s fighting wars that destroyed economies and killed millions, Switzerland stayed peaceful and stable. When France and Germany fought, Switzerland traded with both. When World War I broke out and Europe tore itself apart, Switzerland remained neutral and made money selling goods to all sides. Neutrality also made Switzerland attractive for something else: banking. If you were a wealthy European and your country kept getting invaded or having revolutions, where would you put your money? Switzerland. Because no matter who won the war or which government came to power, Switzerland stayed stable. Your money was safe there. So wealthy families across Europe started depositing money in Swiss banks. This was the beginning of Switzerland's banking industry, but it was still relatively small in the 1800s. What turned Swiss banking into a global empire was a law passed in 1934 that made Switzerland the world's vault. Banking secrecy became not just a practice, but a crime to violate, and that changed everything. In 1934, Switzerland passed the Swiss Banking Act, and this law created the most secretive banking system in the world. The law made it a criminal offense for banks to reveal any information about their clients. If a banker disclosed a client's identity, account details, or any financial information, they could be imprisoned. This wasn't just a policy, this was criminal law. Why did Switzerland do this? Officially, the story is that Switzerland wanted to protect German Jews who were hiding money from the Nazis. Hitler's government was confiscating Jewish assets, and Swiss banking secrecy allowed Jews to protect their wealth. That's the noble version. The reality is more complicated. Swiss banks saw an opportunity. If they offered complete anonymity, they could attract wealthy clients from all over the world. Dictators who stole from their countries, business owners evading taxes, criminals hiding illegal profits. Anyone who wanted to hide money from their government could open a Swiss bank account with complete secrecy. And Switzerland didn't ask questions. You didn't even need to use your real name. Swiss banks offered numbered accounts where your identity was known only to a few senior bankers. The account was just a number. Even most bank employees didn't know who owned the accounts they were managing. This made Switzerland incredibly attractive to the world's wealthy and powerful. By the mid-20th century, Swiss banks were managing billions of dollars for clients who wanted privacy. And Switzerland charged premium fees for this service. The banking industry became one of the largest sectors of Switzerland's economy, employing hundreds of thousands of people and generating enormous profits. But banking secrecy came with a dark side. Because Switzerland didn't ask where the money came from, they became complicit in some of the worst crimes of the 20th century. And nowhere was this more evident than during World War II, when Switzerland accepted Nazi gold while claiming to be neutral. This is the most controversial chapter in Switzerland's history, and it's essential to understanding how Switzerland became so wealthy. During World War II, Switzerland claimed to be neutral. They didn't join the Axis or the Allies. They stayed out of the fighting. But in reality, Switzerland profited massively from the war, and they did business with Nazi Germany in ways that are still debated today. They had seized gold from the countries they conquered and from Holocaust victims. Gold teeth, wedding rings, jewelry, everything was melted down into gold bars. But the Nazis couldn't use this gold directly because most of the world wouldn't trade with them, so they needed to launder it. Switzerland provided that service. Swiss banks accepted Nazi gold deposits, no questions asked. They converted the gold into Swiss francs, which the Nazis then used to buy supplies from neutral countries. Switzerland knew the gold was stolen. They knew some of it came from Holocaust victims, but they accepted it anyway because it was profitable. Estimates suggest Switzerland received over $400 million worth of Nazi gold during the war, equivalent to billions today. But it wasn't just banking. Swiss companies sold weapons, machinery, and supplies to Nazi Germany throughout the war. Switzerland claimed this was necessary to maintain neutrality and avoid invasion, but the reality is they profited enormously while the rest of Europe was being destroyed. After the war, Switzerland refused to return much of the Nazi gold. They claimed they didn't know it was stolen, or that it was impossible to determine ownership. It took decades of international pressure before Switzerland finally agreed to create a fund to compensate Holocaust survivors. And even then, the amount was far less than what they had taken. This dark chapter shows the cost of Switzerland's model. Yes, they stayed neutral and avoided the destruction of war, but they did so by profiting from genocide and enabling one of history's worst regimes. Even today, Switzerland's role in World War II remains controversial and damages their reputation. While banking made Switzerland famous, it's not the only reason they're wealthy. Switzerland also became a global leader in precision manufacturing, and this sector is just as important to their economy as banking. Let's talk about Swiss watches. Switzerland doesn't have any special resources for making watches, no rare minerals, no unique technology that only they possess, but Swiss watchmakers developed a reputation for precision, craftsmanship, and quality that became unmatched anywhere in the world. Rolex, Patek Philippe, Omega, Tag Heuer, and dozens of other luxury watch brands are Swiss. These aren't just watches. They're status symbols that sell for thousands or even millions of dollars. The Swiss watch industry generates over $20 billion per year in exports. But how did Switzerland dominate this industry? It started in the 1500s when Protestant refugees fled religious persecution in France and settled in Switzerland. Many of them were skilled craftsmen, and they brought watchmaking techniques with them. Over centuries, Swiss watchmakers perfected their craft, creating increasingly complex and precise timepieces. By the 1800s, Swiss watches were considered the best in the world. When quartz watches were invented in the 1970s, they nearly destroyed the Swiss watch industry because quartz was cheaper and more accurate. But the Swiss pivoted. Instead of competing on price, they doubled down on luxury. They marketed Swiss watches as art, heritage, and status. And it worked. Today, Swiss watches are more expensive than ever, and people pay premium prices for the craftsmanship and brand. But it's not just watches. Switzerland is also a pharmaceutical powerhouse. Novartis and Roche, two of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world, are Swiss. Together, they generate over $100 billion in annual revenue. The pharmaceutical industry employs tens of thousands of Swiss workers and is one of the country's largest exporters. Switzerland also dominates in specialty chemicals, medical devices, and high-precision machinery. The common theme is always the same: precision, quality, and expertise. Switzerland focuses on industries where being the best matters more than being the cheapest. They make products that require skill and knowledge, not just cheap labor. This strategy protects Swiss industries from competition with low-cost countries like China. You can't outsource Swiss watchmaking to China and expect the same result. Switzerland isn't just a banking secrecy haven, it's also a tax haven, and this has attracted some of the world's largest corporations and wealthiest individuals to move there. Here's how it works. Switzerland has a federal system where each canton sets its own tax rates, and cantons compete aggressively to attract businesses and rich individuals by offering extremely low taxes. Some cantons charge corporate tax rates as low as 12% to 14%, far below most European countries that charge 25% to 30%. For wealthy individuals, some Swiss cantons offer special deals called lump sum taxation. This allows ultra-wealthy foreigners to pay a fixed annual tax based on their living expenses, rather than their actual worldwide income. So a billionaire could live in Switzerland, own companies generating hundreds of millions in profit, and pay maybe a few million in taxes total. It's completely legal, and it's made Switzerland a magnet for the ultra-rich. Corporations love Switzerland for the same reason. Major companies like Glencore, Nestle, Novartis, and hundreds of others have headquarters in Switzerland, partly because of favorable tax treatment. But here's the controversial part. Many multinational companies set up subsidiaries in Switzerland, not because they actually operate there, but purely for tax purposes. They route profits through Switzerland to avoid paying higher taxes in other countries. For example, a tech company might have all its sales in Germany but report the profits through a Swiss subsidiary that paid lower taxes. This is called profit shifting, and Switzerland has become a hub for it. The European Union and the United States have accused Switzerland of being a tax haven that helps corporations avoid paying their fair share. There have been massive international pressure campaigns to force Switzerland to change its tax laws and share financial information with other governments. Switzerland has resisted for decades, but the pressure is increasing. Some reforms have been made, but Switzerland still offers far lower taxes than most developed countries, and they continue to attract businesses and billionaires because of it. The tax haven strategy works because Switzerland offers stability, rule of law, and discretion. Companies and individuals trust that Switzerland won't suddenly change the rules or confiscate their assets. Combined with low taxes, this makes Switzerland incredibly attractive, despite having no natural resources, no ocean access, and a high cost of living. For decades, Switzerland's model seemed untouchable. Banking secrecy and tax advantages made them rich, and no one could force them to change. But in the past 15 years, everything has been challenged, and Switzerland has had to adapt. The breaking point came in 2008 during the global financial crisis. The United States government was desperate for tax revenue and started investigating Americans who were hiding money in Swiss banks to avoid taxes. They targeted UBS, Switzerland's largest bank, and discovered that UBS had been actively helping thousands of wealthy Americans evade taxes through secret accounts. The US threatened massive fines and criminal prosecution. Switzerland was forced to choose: protect banking secrecy or face economic war with the United States. They chose survival. In 2009, Switzerland agreed to weaken banking secrecy. They would share information with foreign governments in cases of tax evasion. This was a huge crack in the system. Then the pressure increased. The European Union demanded that Switzerland share banking information with EU member states. They threatened to blacklist Swiss banks if Switzerland didn't comply. One by one, Switzerland signed agreements to share financial data with other countries. By 2018, Switzerland had joined the Common Reporting Standard, which meant they automatically share financial information with over 100 countries. Banking secrecy, the foundation of Switzerland's banking empire, was effectively dead. Clients could no longer hide money in Switzerland without their home governments finding out. This devastated parts of Switzerland's banking industry. Billions of dollars fled to other tax havens that still offered secrecy. Many Swiss banks closed or merged because they lost their competitive advantage. But Switzerland adapted. They shifted focus from secrecy to expertise. Swiss banks now market themselves as expert wealth managers who provide sophisticated investment services, not just secrecy. They emphasize stability, quality, and discretion, not anonymity. Switzerland also faced challenges on corporate taxes. The EU declared some of Switzerland's special corporate tax deals illegal and demanded changes. Switzerland was forced to reform its tax system in 2020, eliminating some of the most aggressive tax advantages. But they still maintain relatively low taxes compared to most of Europe, and they've introduced new incentives to keep companies from leaving. The challenge for Switzerland is maintaining competitiveness without the secrecy and extreme tax advantages they once offered. Can Switzerland stay rich without the controversial practices that made them wealthy? So what can we learn from Switzerland's success, and has their model actually worked long term? Let's start with the results. Switzerland has one of the highest GDP per capita in the world at over $90,000. Their unemployment rate is consistently below 3%. They have virtually no poverty. The quality of life is exceptional with world-class healthcare, education, infrastructure, and safety. Political stability has lasted over 200 years without a single civil war or revolution. By almost every measure, Switzerland is one of the most successful countries on Earth. So what did they do right? First, they leveraged neutrality strategically. By staying out of wars, Switzerland avoided the destruction that bankrupted other European countries. While neighbors spent fortunes on military conflicts, Switzerland invested in economic development. Second, they focused on high-value industries: banking, pharmaceuticals, precision manufacturing, luxury goods. Switzerland doesn't compete on price. They compete on quality, expertise, and reputation. This protects them from competition with low-cost competition. Third, they maintained stability and rule of law. Switzerland's political system is incredibly stable with strong institutions, low corruption, and predictable policies. This makes businesses and wealthy individuals trust Switzerland with their money and operations. Fourth, federalism and competition between cantons created innovation. Because cantons compete to attract businesses and residents, they constantly improve services and lower taxes. This internal competition made Switzerland more efficient. But let's also be honest about the costs and controversies. Switzerland built much of its wealth on morally questionable practices. Banking secrecy enabled tax evasion, money laundering, and hid the assets of dictators and criminals. Their role in World War II, accepting Nazi gold and profiting from genocide, remains a dark stain on their history. And their tax haven policies have been criticized for helping corporations avoid paying taxes in countries where they actually operate, depriving those countries of revenue. Switzerland also benefits from advantages that are hard to replicate. Their small size and geographic location in the heart of Europe are unique. Their culture of neutrality developed over centuries, and they had the good fortune of avoiding 2 world wars that destroyed their neighbors. Could another country copy Switzerland's model? Probably not completely. But there are lessons. Focus on high-value industries. Maintain political stability and rule of law. Use geography and strategic positioning to your advantage. Build a reputation for quality and reliability. Switzerland proves that you don't need natural resources, large populations, or military power to become wealthy. You need strategy, stability, and a willingness to adapt when the world changes. If you want to see another country that built wealth through strategic positioning and smart policies, check out my video on how Singapore went from kicked out of Malaysia to 5 times richer. The link is in the description. If you found this valuable, hit the like button and subscribe because we're breaking down more economic transformations every week. See you in the next one.